Welcome everyone to the third class in this expanded Yoga Sutra study series. And we are now studying chapter 1, the Samādhi Pādaḥ. So just to give an overview, because we didn't have class last Saturday, overview of what we have covered so far. Patanjali has covered the following topics. He has said what yoga is. Yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, and then he says when the vrittis or the fluctuations of the mind cease, then tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. The seer resides in its own nature. What it means is that everything that is happening is in the mind only. So if you see the mind falls, it's like a reflection. So that's that thing. Okay. So what all that we perceive, let's say this lake, this is like the mind. Everything that we see is in the mind. So the Puruṣa, or this Atma, whatever you call it, it is pure. It's like this radiant moon. But the reflection depends on the condition of the reflecting medium, conditions of the mind. So there is only I am. Anything we add, I am happy, I am sad, I am delighted, all these things are conditioners. It depends on the conditioning medium, which is the lake here. So if the lake has ripples, then it looks like I am in a certain state. But the Puruṣa, is in its nature very pure. And the only way to see it is when the fluctuations of the mind are quietened. If there's a whirlpool, then it looks like this is like a swirl here. So that is what Patanjali means by saying tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Then he goes on to talk about the different kinds of vrittis, the 5 types of vrittis. All mental modifications fall under this category. And then he goes to say Abhyasa vairāgyāpyam tannirodha. He says how by the practice of yoga, how one can reduce the vrittis, how we can attain the state of nirodha. Okay, tannirodha, the cessation of the vrittis, how it's obtained, he says that. Okay, let's see. Then he defines what is abhyasa and vairāgya. So there are 2 things that are needed for the state of nirodha, to reduce the cessation of the vrittis. Abhyasa is practice. He says tatra sthitau yatno abhyasa. That which gives steadiness of the mind is the practice. And that's how he defined the practice. We saw the story of Dhruva. Then he defines vairāgya. And vairāgya is dispassion. It is drishta anushravika vishaya vitrishnasya vashīkāra samya vairāgyam. It is the supreme mastery over heard and revealed objects. Okay, so that is called vairāgya. And we saw, for all this, we saw some stories. We saw the story of Dhruva. For vairāgya, he was not interested in all these temptations. He wanted the ultimate truth of what happens after death. And for the practice, we also saw satu dirgha kala nairantarya satkara sevitau dridabhu mihi. When it's done for a long time, it becomes firmly rooted. And we saw the story of Shabari in the Ramayana. And for the practice, we saw the story of Dhruva. Okay, so that is where we left. Okay, let's go to this point where we left out. Now we are going to enter after one sutra, we are going to enter a very important topic. So 16th, I will cover its continuation of vairāgyam, which is dispassion. So if you are craving, then the mind cannot achieve this state of nirodha. Oh, I want to get into this state of samadhi. With that attitude, if you go, you cannot steady the mind. It has to be a completely dispassionate mind. In fact, Patanjali will say in the final higher states of samadhi, it is all about para-vairāgya, great dispassion. That is what will get you there. So this is the thing. If you go like with a state of, I am going to master this, then you won't get it. It is a state of letting go. That's how you tackle the mind. Tat param Puruṣa khyate gunavaitrishnyam. So now Patanjali says how you can attain that state of vairāgyam. And this is very similar shloka comes in the Bhagavad Gītā. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. So here it says, upon gaining the supreme knowledge of the Puruṣa, you are in such joy that even the thirst, craving for the gunas, all those ceases. So how do you substitute? So we are always, we want some pleasure. How do you substitute that for something higher? So the dispassion is very difficult, seemingly, because you're always, when I ask you, okay, leave the desire for all your favorite things, it's going to be very difficult. And Patanjali explains how you can do it by tuning on to something higher. So at param Puruṣa khyate, upon gaining that supreme knowledge, all these gunas, the gunas are the ones which cause craving, attraction. All these things are the function of the gunas. He's going to later define what the gunas are. These are the things which create all these turbulences in the mind. And he says, by gaining that supreme knowledge, something higher, by focusing on something higher, the bliss that you get will let you relinquish the smaller objects that give you pleasure. So that is the trick to getting vairāgya. So in the Bhagavad Gītā also say, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina. For somebody who has attained some level of dispassion, the objects of the senses recede away. Vishaya vinivartante means they recede away. Niraharasya means one who doesn't want to feed on the sense objects. The senses don't want to feed. So niraharasya dehina. But rasavarjam, that little bit of, even when you sit in meditation, the desire, the tingling, I am missing that may remain. But raso apiyasya param drishtva nivartate. Even that clinging, when one has encountered something bigger, something, it can be anything. Something bigger means a higher state of meditation. It is a vision of God, whatever it is, then even the thirst goes away. Okay, so that is this. Puruṣa khyati means realization. Here it means realization or the discriminative knowledge of the Puruṣa. The gunas, or rajas and tamas, they also drop away. Okay. Right. Okay. Now comes the different states of samadhi. So this chapter is chapter. So it is pretty dense. So here you may want to focus a little bit. So the way Patanjali goes is, he defines broadly the two types of samadhis, samprajñāta and asaṃprajñāta. Prajña means here, prajña means wisdom generally. Here it means cognition. It means with cognition and without cognition. What it literally means is that, as in a nutshell, it means in one case, samprajñāta, you have an object of focus. In the asaṃprajñāta, you don't have an object of focus. It is just like void. So obviously, which one do you think is a higher state of samadhi? Samprajñāta with an object of focus, or asaṃprajñāta without an object of focus? Can anybody say? Which is a more difficult and higher state?
I would say without an object.
Yes, so asaṃprajñāta can be reached only after samprajñāta. Using the object of focus, then you go there. Okay. Now, the way Patanjali, so all these are sutras, they are meant to be deciphered, opened, explained by a competent teacher. So he defines samprajñāta, asaṃprajñāta in 2 sutras. Then he defines the various types of samprajñāta a little later in this chapter. But Patanjali has not defined samadhi at all. That he defines in the 3rd chapter. So it's a little, it's not easy for those who don't have an idea of samadhi to know all this. So what I'm going to do is jump to the 3rd chapter and then talk about what samadhi is. But to know what samadhi is, you need to know the steps that lead to samadhi. Okay, samadhi literally means a state of absorption. Okay, now how do you get to that? It's considered the ultimate state in yoga. How do you get to the state of samadhi? So all the practices we do, pranayama, asana, everything, tapas, fasting, everything is meant to get to the state of samadhi, to purify the mind, reduce the disturbance of the mind, make the body suitable so that you get that state. So samadhi is reached in 3 stages: dhāraṇā, dhyāna, and finally samadhi. It's reached in stages. Tasya bhumishu viniyogaha. It is done in stages. It'll say that in 3rd chapter. So I'm going to jump into the 3rd chapter and tell you what the samadhi is about. So to tell you what samadhi is about, I need to tell you the steps that you would have to take to go to samadhi. So first is dhāraṇā. So when you sit in meditation, the mind wanders. Dhāraṇā, Patanjali defines as desha bandha chittasya dhāraṇā. Dhāraṇā is the binding of the mind to a particular space. Desha means space. Bandha means bind. Chittasya is the mind. That is called dhāraṇā. What do you mean by space? Fixing the attention within a certain boundary. So for example, you can say the desha is the container. You want to say, okay, I'm going to fix my attention on my chest and observe my breathing. I'm not going to think about what's going on my toes, my hair, all that. I'm just going to focus on the sensations in my chest and the breathing. So that is dhāraṇā. Okay, but here the mind wanders. You close your chest and you bring your attention. Close your eyes and you bring your attention to the chest. The mind wanders away. You bring it back. Okay, that is dhāraṇā. So far, everything is clear. Dhāraṇā, when you observe the sensations of the breath in the chest, the mind wanders. I told you, we bring it back. It is a series of contacts. It is not a smooth flow. In fact, Vachaspati Mishra gives this example. When you're pouring water from a pot, whether a clay pot or this kind of a pot, that your kettle, whatever it is, it has a narrow opening. So when you try to pour water, what happens? There's a splish splash happening, due to which the water flow is not continuous. It happens in discontinuous chunks. So Patanjali says the dhāraṇā is a series of contacts, not smooth flow. You come to the sensation, mind wanders, bring it back. So that's what happens. It is all, your focus is all about containment. So far, everything is clear, everybody? I don't have anybody's video, so okay. Then the next step is the dhyāna. Tatra pratyayikatanata dhyanam. There, in that space, pratyaya ekatanata dhyanam, the continuous unbroken flow of the same mental modifications is meditation. Now, here, this is the problem with there are so many textbooks written. In fact, even many people who, even so-called competent people who give a lecture, because they themselves have not done a lot of meditation, so they will just say, pratyaya ekatanata means the screen of the mind, the picture that you have in the mind. So the mind has a mind screen, right? We've talked about it. That has to be constant. So if there's a flower, it has to be flower, constantly flower. That is not really true. There can be, as Patanjali says, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha, but it's not sarva chitta vritti nirodha. There is some modifications can be there. So here it means, yes, there is a flower, but now there can be, you can be thinking about the shape of the flower, the color, the smell, all these things keep happening. So it has to be one particular thing. It's all about the flower. Now the mind is not going to Disneyland or some other place. So here, tatra, there, pratyaya, the mental modifications, ekatanata, one continuous flow, that is meditation. In dharana, the mind touches the object, flies away, it's pulled back, it's a series of contacts. Here, the mind revolves around the object without any break. So Vyasa calls this sadrisha pravaha, which means a flow of similar thoughts. Important. So this is why we should use the commentary of a competent teacher. So Vyasa calls this sadrisha pravaha. Sadrisha means similar. Sadrisha pravaha, which means thoughts. So the example that Vachaspati Mishra gives is, it's likened to a smooth flow of oil from the pot. The candle is, or a candle which is burning, you see the smoke coming. At the micro level, there are a lot of changes, but at the macro level, it looks like a single flame. But the size of the candle is reducing, the smoke, it keeps changing, and finally the candle extinguishes. So there's a lot of changes that are going on, but it looks like there is one picture. Okay. The image can change. You can look at different aspects of the image. Vyasa so uses the similar mental modifications. So he does not say identical, fixed modifications. So, and Swami Hariharananda adds a psychological nuance to this. In dharana, you are aware of the location. In dhyāna, the location becomes secondary. For example, if you want to focus on the sensations of the breath, you're moving, looking at the diaphragm move, or the stomach going, changing the diaphragm, moving up and down. Then in dhyana, the mind starts to focus on the subtle qualities. Yes, that is there. Now some subtle sensations come in, some coolness comes in, some happiness comes in. So you start to notice all that. Dhyana is still dualistic. This is the very important point. The first two, you know you are meditating. You are not lost. The ego is still distinct from the object. And this will disappear only in the third state, which is samadhi. What is samadhi? Tadevattamatra nirpasam swarupa shunyamiva samadhihi. When that very object of meditation, so you're observing this breath and you're starting to feel this nice, let's say, warm sensations in the body. You're sitting in a cold place and some warmth you're starting to feel. Then when finally you just get engrossed into that, you just lose track of the fact, I am observing this diaphragm moving up and down, the chest going up, out and in, and then you just get engrossed with it. Instead of that, you are now in this warmth and you're feeling yourself expanding and contracting. Then, as though devoid of the subject, the very object of meditation alone shines forth. As though devoid of the subject, I am meditating. That state is called samadhi. Tateva, that very artham means object of meditation. Nirbhasam means shining. Swarupa shunya means one's own form becomes empty. So you lose track of the fact that you are observing this thing going up, out, and like just going out and out, and then you just merge in and you just feel like expanse, warmth, and you're just feeling yourself go something like expanding and coming yourself, or you feel the warmth and you're just merged with that. So, and Patanjali says swarupa shunya means as though subject is lost, as though you've lost yourself. You're not daydreaming. Your mind is focused. but you have lost the notion that you are observing. You are one with that. And the most important thing is Swarupa Shunya means the notion of the mind has gone now. Iva he uses. Why does he use Iva? Because he's very careful to use Iva. The mind hasn't actually been destroyed. If it were destroyed, you would be dead or unconscious or liberated. Mind is still there. It is functioning perfectly, but it's transparent. It doesn't have the subject-object difference. It looks like it's transparent. That is Samadhi. Okay? All right. And people usually give, even in Buddhism, they give the analogy of training a horse. In dhyāraṇā, the horse struggles to escape, but it's confined to a circle. It tries this is how they train a wild horse. It struggles, it tries to get away, it goes all inside the circle, but it's not able to go out. The person is observing the horse. Then in dhyāna, slowly moves within the circle, it's eating grass. The person comes closer, sits within the circle. The horse is not afraid of the person. It's not trying to break free. It is just confined within the circle. Or you can think of the rope as an elastic rope. The horse, there is some elasticity. It tries, or the pole bends. It tries to move a little out of the circle. Then it's pulled back in because of the elasticity. And then in Samadhi, the observer and the horse have become one entity. So the person is riding the horse. So those are the analogies for dhāraṇā, dhyāna, and samadhi. So you cannot directly go to samadhi. It is first, when you start meditation, dhāraṇā, dhyāna, and samadhi. Okay? Now, Patanjali defines what is called samprajñāta samadhi. I already told you it is, samprajñāta means with cognition. Cognition means with an object of focus. So, Patanjali says, vitarka vicāra ānanda asmitā rūpānugamat samprajñāta. When concentration is reached after following the forms of vitarka, which means gross perceptibles, it looks very complicated, but I'll explain. It's very easy. Vicāra, subtle perceptibles, ānanda, blissful feelings, and asmitā, the I sense. Then it is called samprajñāta samadhi. So this one, probably I can confidently say of all the books that I have read, and even all the talks that people have given, I've attended so many Yoga Sutra talks. Only Swami Hariharananda's book captures this correctly. Other people, they talk about something else which doesn't, and it's full of self-contradicting views. So this is actually extremely simple. What Patanjali is saying is, he's talking about the 4 levels, 4 types of samprajñāta samadhis, going from the gross all the way to the very refined. So everything is in stages. Once you exit out of samprajñāta samadhi, then you go into asaṃprajñāta. So in samprajñāta itself, the 4 stages are getting more and more subtle and refined, from gross to the subtle. Vitarka means gross inquiry. So gross perceptibles, gross or applied attention, all these are used. Vitarka, that's the first stage, vitarka. Then vicāra. Vicāra means it's a subtle perceptibles, subtle inquiry onto the nature of things. So, and then ānanda, which means bliss, and asmitā, the I sense. I sense can be confusing, so we'll come to that, what it is. The first savitarka, there can be presence of all 4. Even you'll have some joy when you're doing. In the second, it is devoid of the gross perceptibles. And I'll quickly come and give an example so it's all clear. And in the third, when you go to the ānanda, there is no vitarka and vichara. There's no subtle or gross perceptibles, and in asmitā there's pure I sense alone. There's none of the above three. With that, I will jump into some, talk a little more and give some examples. So the broad classification of samadhi: samprajñāta, prajñāta means knowing, cognition. Samprajñāta means with. Sam means with. Samprajñāta means with cognition, and asaṃprajñāta is without an object or cognition. In asaṃprajñāta samadhi, all modifications of the mind are set at rest. Okay. In samprajñāta samadhi, there is a seed or object of focus. In samprajñāta samadhi, the mind is not entirely arrested, but it's in a partially arrested state because there are still these vrittis. Therefore, it is inevitable that it will require an object of concentration. Asaṃprajñāta samadhi is without any object of focus, so it's called nirbija. Bija means seed. Nirbija means without a seed to focus on. Okay. Asaṃprajñāta samadhi obviously can only be reached after samprajñāta. That is, state of emptiness only after you have an object of focus. In samprajñāta samadhi, there is knowledge cutting at the root of all afflictions. That is how you get the benefit. When you start to focus the mind, then even in the siddhis, in fact, that's how things get revealed. And then there is knowledge, and that cuts all the afflictions. In asaṃprajñāta samadhi, that knowledge is also suppressed through absolute detachment. So vairāgyam, it is going to be the key thing for asaṃprajñāta samadhi. Okay. And Swami Hariharananda here points out that concentration is also possible for short periods of times through anger, greed, infatuation, but this is not sustained. So this does not lead to emancipation. Samadhi will always lead, it's a path towards emancipation, which means liberation. So the other things like this focused mind through anger, greed, hatred, those are not considered yoga or samadhis. All right. Now, the four types: vitarka, gross perceptibles; vichāra, subtle perceptibles; sa ānanda samadhi, sa asmitā samadhi, with bliss with the I sense. Sa means with I sense. Nir means without. And even the vitarka samadhi can be classified into two varieties. See, now so many varieties. That's why I said you have to pay close attention. Samprajñāta, asaṃprajñāta. In samprajñāta, four types: vitarka, vichāra, sānanda, sa asmitā. In vitarka, there is sa vitarka and nir vitarka. So there is you are still dealing with the gross perceptibles, but there's a small difference, and we'll go into this. Similarly, vichāra, sa vichāra and nir vichāra. Saying vichāra means there is already inquiry. Why are you saying with and without? Yes, there is inquiry, but the inquiry has a special way, and we'll see that. Okay. Let me see. So you're all waiting for, so I'm talking all this, you're all waiting for a example. Okay, let's first start with vitarka. In vitarka, there is always in savitarka. So vitarka is about gross perceptibles. What is a gross perceptible? An object you're trying to focus. Okay, some people focus on the sun, the rising sun. So they imagine effulgent light in the ocean. They see the sun come up, and the people in the East Coast, they would see the sun come up over the ocean, and that is the object of focus. There's effulgent light. So, and that is savitarka samadhi. It is a gross thing. It is something which is gross. It is not something very fine idea, or a flower. You can focus on a flower. Now, V means special. Tarka means reasoning, logic, or inquiry. So, Vitarka is a focused or directed stream of thought applicable to a chosen object of concentration, as opposed to ordinary distracted thinking. So when you're thinking of the sun, you are just merging into the glory of the sun. It is this effulgent being, that which provides life. So in fact, in Shankara has 6 deities which one can, which are Vishesha Devatas, objects of focus for worship. Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, there is Ganesha, there is Kartikeya, finally there is Surya, sun. So that's why they have the Aditya Hridayam. Sun is considered an object worthy of focus. So here you can direct a stream of thoughts on the sun. This process involves the mind actively associating the object of meditation with these 3 key elements. Shabda, which is the word, the name. So you're saying, okay, sun, that thought, the word sun keeps coming. Artha, meaning, the artha, what's the sun? It is that which sustains the entire earth. So artha, meaning, and jnana, knowledge, memory and conceptual understanding, or a flower in this case. Name or object, label of the object is flower, and meaning the tangible flower you're meditating on, and knowledge, memory and conceptual understanding of the object, your past experiences and ideas about what a flower is. So artha is, shabda is just the word, the sound, whatever, pushpa, that sound. Artha, you associate it with a tangible, pushpa means flower. Jnana means, okay, flower, this has the smell, you imagine a rose, all those things, all those 3. Okay, so this is vitarka. Now vitarka can be done as savitarka with words and languages involved, or nirvitarka, words and language is not involved. Even here it gets a little subtler. See, gross form of samadhi consists of mingling of the object's characteristics and its name. This is still a gross form of samadhi, but just the object's characteristics without mingling its name. There's no language involved. You still see the sun, the object shining, but there is no Surya, or all these words don't come up. Sound, even color, etc., are taken in by the senses, are mingled. You will just say the word yellow comes in when I see the sun. Red, all those are dropped out. It is just, you're just seeing the plain thing rise up. You're a little more concentrated, absorbed into that. The flower or the sun, Swamiji says, is a conglomeration of several features. It is perceptible by our senses, but which are comprehended as a single entity. So, but in nirvitarka samadhi, you visualize just the thing without the language. And for example, some people say in a temple, you go, you see this a divine being, a deva, you see a picture, or you see that in somewhere else, and this person or being comes in your meditation, you visualize it. You don't know what it is. You don't put any words or language, and you just visualize and meditate on that. And some people have gone into deep states that way. So that is nirvitarka samadhi. Okay, so samadhi has samprajñāta, asaṃprajñāta. In samprajñāta, there are gradations from gross to the fine. Vitarka, vicāra, ānanda, asmitā. And in that, there is savitarka, nirvitarka. And similarly, we're going to savichara, nirvichara. So vitarka means gross perceptibles. Savitarka means with words and language. Nirvitarka is without words and language. Okay. So far, is everything clear? See, I'm not able to see anybody's face. So, okay. All right. Now, vichara. Now we are going one step more refined. The flower. Let's just take the flower. You're meditating on the flower. Now, this flower object is there. Then, at some point when you get more concentrated, this object goes away and you only remain in the beauty of the smell. You are going into a finer object of focus, the smell. You're just, that smell, sometimes for people in meditation, smells come in and they use that as a focus. In fact, Patanjali says that we can use Vishayavati va pravritti utpanna manasaha sthiti nibandhini. Swamiji often jokes when we are sitting in meditation, all these delicious dishes, you'll say sambar, vada, all those things, Indian dishes, those come to people's mind. Sometimes can be real, sometimes it's just the mind wandering away. Anyway, so vichara means subtle reflective inquiry. V again means special. Chara means to move. So moving towards in a special way towards subtle reflective inquiry. Move the focus from the gross to the subtle. These subtle objects include the tanmatras, subtle potentials of sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Why it's called subtle potential means that there is no actual smell, but you feel that smell within. So it is the tanmatra, it is the subtle potential of the sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And then the ahankara, the I-ness or the principle of ego, then the mind itself, the internal instrument of thought, that's antakarana. So in vichara, the mind moves beyond the outer form and investigates the essence of the object in terms of time, space, and causal relationships. Okay, so, and similarly, just as we saw with vitarka, there is savichara and nirvichara samadhis. Words and languages are involved in the thinking, words and languages are not involved in nirvichara samadhi. Savichara, words and languages are involved. So, and Swamiji says, only when concentration relating to gross objects is mastered, you can go into this, the subtler, what's below the form. There is the smell or the taste, everything, all those things you can get into. So the example which he gives is from savitarka to savichara. Let's say there is forms. So one question people may ask us, so can we go from savitarka to savichara, or we have to go from savitarka, nirvitarka, and then savichara? So Swamiji seems to indicate you can go from savitarka samadhi to savichara. Some people have words and languages are more prominent in their minds, and that's what my meditation teacher also says. So for some people, visual is more, for some people sound is more. Sound means all these words, language, they come more. So for the such people, savitarka to savichara. Okay, the form, from the forms, petals, thorns, all that, you go into the scent of the rose. So that is going from savitarka to savichara. Okay, then comes the third state, ānanda samadhi. Sa means with bliss. Ānanda means bliss. So it's concentration on the bliss. The meditator's focus shifts from a subtle element to an even more subtle object. The mind or the instrument of perception itself. You notice the mind is happy. It is free from objects of concentration. Now the rose has gone into the background. There is, rose is gone, the smell is gone, and you're happy. You're just staying in the state of happiness. Object of concentration is a feeling of sattvic happiness felt all over the mind and the organs of cognition. You just bask in that happiness, especially visible. This is after pranayama also, you see some of this. Okay. And then finally, the asmitā samādhi. This is the pure eye sense. Remember, we showed the moon. The moon is like, but when you see it on the water, if there's ripples, it looks rippled. So then that's how you say, I am happy, I am sad. But this is the pure I am. You get into that state. There's no qualifiers. I am man, I am woman, all that drop away. There is just Sa Ananda Samadhi. I am the pure ego sense. It is not a feeling of bliss. After the bliss, you go into the state. This is the difference between Sa Ananda and Sa Asmitā. So this is I am happy. You don't say. It is just I am. You stay in that, stripped of all other feelings and identification. Do you see this important difference? In fact, the Buddha talks about it. Buddha, in great details, we'll see that in the next slide. He talks about the jhanas. So the Buddha, we'll come to that slide. And after you also sometimes, for those who practice meditation, and in a serious way, you go to a retreat. Occasionally, you may find this happening. You mind from gross, it becomes finer. Then there is rapture. In the Buddha calls it piti, priti. The Sanskrit word becomes piti in Pali, rapture. And then finally he calls it upeksha or upekka, which is equanimity. There it is just the sense of I, without any qualities. I am happy, I am rapturous, I am joyful, all that's gone. You're just there. That is the final state, Sa Asmitā Samadhi. So object is not the real Puruṣa, but it's imitation, the mutative ego. Because what we see is what's reflected on the lake. There's no blissful feeling, only the serene, luminous awareness of being remains. The distinction between the observer and observed becomes exceedingly fine. Okay, so even in Samadhi, it's not like completely, initially the subject-object completely goes away. It's only here, it's becoming very small. Subject-object definition, remember? So in the entire definition of Samadhi I gave you previously, so Tadeva attamatra nirpasam swarupa shunyamiva samadhihi. Swarupa, that is the subject and object merge. Very object of meditation alone shine forth as though devoid of subject means what? Subject and object merge. That's what's shown by the object, the horse, and the subject becoming one entity. So even that happens in stages. It's not like it's vitarka happens immediately, but it's getting closer. And in Asmitā Samadhi, that the observer and observed, that becomes very fine. The distinction becomes very fine. Okay, so far, is everything clear? It's a lot. You have to reflect on it to understand. And if you have meditation practice, it certainly is very helpful. Okay, so are you guys doing okay with this? I told you this is quite heavy, this class. Any response? Are you guys okay? Move forth. Okay. Now, object of concentration in various samprajñāta samadhi, in vitarka and vicāra, savitarka and nirvitarka, it is knowable objects, that which you can know. In Sa Ananda Samadhi, it is the instrument of cognition, the mind itself. You're feeling the happiness in the mind. In the Sa Asmitā, it is the knower or the I sense, the ego or the I sense. So I told you, the Buddha talks a lot about the 4 jhanas. He is said to have perfected all 4. He was like an expert. He can just play with this. And he favored the 4th jhana, because upeksha, that is the pure state. After all this, the vitarka, vicāra, priti, in Buddhism, in Pali, they call it piti, rapture, and finally equanimity. The 4th is slightly different. The other 3 are very similar. The 4th, the Buddha defines it as upeksha, whereas Patanjali defines this as Sa Asmitā Samadhi. It's the state of I Here, the Buddha concentrates on the equanimity. That's how he describes it. Okay. So conclusion. We have concluded samprajñāta samadhi. The mind is not entirely arrested. It's in a partially arrested state. Therefore, it will require a basis object of concentration. That's why it's called sam, means with, prajñāta means with cognition on an object. Now, Patanjali is going to define asaṃprajñāta samadhi. Virama pratyaya bhyasa purva samskara sheshonyah. Okay. Anyaha means the other. So the other type of samadhi, he doesn't say it is an asaṃprajñāta because it's everything that stirs, but you have to fill in the blanks and understand. Asaṃprajñāta samadhi is the other kind of samadhi. He says virama pratyaya. Virama. See, look, I told you this, right? The Bhagavad Gītā and the Yoga Sūtras are completely different. One is poetry. Bhagavad Gītā is poetry, easy to understand language. The Yoga Sūtras is like a scientific document. So the language, Patanjali nowhere uses the word bhakti. He says Ishvara pranidhana, surrender to Ishvara. And here also a very technical term he uses, virama, which means cessation, stopping, termination. All very technical terms. Pratyaya means the contents of the mind, the movie theater of the mind, the contents of the screen, whatever is images are played on the mind, that's all called pratyaya. Together, virama pratyaya means the cessation of the mental object. Okay, the mind is no longer holding on to the mind screen with all these images. Abhyasa purvaha, preceded by practice. Okay, this clarifies that samprajñāta samadhi is not an accident. It is the result of dedicated, repeated practice of letting go of the final object, virama pratyaya. This practice is para-vairāgya. He's going to later say that. And so virama pratyaya, the object of focus, is gone. Samskara sheshaha, which means only the samskaras remain. Okay, the samskaras are the latent impressions, the subliminal traces. The sheshaha means residue. Samskara is the latent impressions. Whenever we think a thought, it leaves an impression. When we act, it leaves an impression. Even you don't even need to act. The thought itself, if you think a bad thought, it leaves an impression. Karma, you accumulated karma. Later he will say that in asaṃprajñāta samadhi, even though the samskaras remain. So samskaras, these things, they compare it to seeds. So if a seed, because what this imprint is what will cause a future action. So this is like a seed sprouting, or in the yoga philosophy, they believe it is all the imprints which determine. The imprints are nothing but your karma, your storehouse of karma, which determine your future lifetimes. We'll see that in the second chapter. What the kind of body you're going to get in your next life. All this is your storehouse of karma, which is nothing but these latent impressions. Now, in asaṃprajñāta samadhi, the impressions are there, but it's like a burnt seed. A burnt seed does not sprout. So seeds, it's like fried seeds that can no longer grow. Okay. So when all fluctuations cease, the arrested state of the mind with only the latencies which have been roasted is called asaṃprajñāta samadhi. This is the highest level of samadhi. Okay, let's summarize everything. Samprajñāta, it uses a seed of focus. So it's called sabija, with seed. Asaṃprajñāta, it's called nirbija, without seed. And Swami Hariharananda, in his commentary, he also says There are other types of nirbija samadhi. So that part I don't know, but this is a nirbija samadhi without a seed. Object of focus in samprajñāta, a gross or subtle object is required. In asaṃprajñāta, it is objectless awareness. And in the mental activity is one-pointed cognition. The vritti remains. In asaṃprajñāta samadhi, all mental modifications, vrittis, cease. In the state of the samskaras, it is active or dormant. They can still, these seeds can still sprout. In the asaṃprajñāta samadhi, they are fried. They cannot sprout. You got into such a state that all the impressions are gone. The I sense is just very close to liberation in asaṃprajñāta. The I sense is present in the final stage. It is the object, right? We saw that vitarka, vicāra, ānanda, asmitā. Even in ānanda, oh, I am observing the happiness in my mind. In the first savitarka, I am observing the flower. In the savichara, I am observing the smell of the flower. So the I sense is there. In asaṃprajñāta, it is dissolved. Okay. How it's achieved? It's achieved through concentration, dhāraṇā, and meditation. This is the most important thing. In asaṃprajñāta samadhi, it is through supreme non-attachment, para-vairāgya. You got lost thirst in all these things. The only thing you want is that liberation. So it's completely, even that liberation thought probably has gone away. It is that is the state of asaṃprajñāta samadhi. Very, very high state. And so the lower samadhis are called samprajñāta samadhis. All these we've seen: savitarka, savichara, ānanda, asmitā, and nirvitarka, nirvichara. Then asaṃprajñāta samadhi, we've seen even the latent impressions are rendered dormant like fried steeds. And in between, there's one more which Patanjali mentions in the last chapters. It is called dharma mega samadhi. It's a transition. It's a threshold to asaṃprajñāta where para-vairāgyam and viveka khyati are attained. Discriminative awareness and supreme dispassion are attained, but the latent impressions have not been fried. They can also come up. So he calls that dharma mega. It's a transition. Okay. After this asmitā, the person gets viveka khyati. That is, the person is able to distinguish the Puruṣa from the Prakriti. All right. Now comes, so I'll take a little more time and go over these sutras and also tell a story. So in this chapter, it's very dense, right? So I'm giving a lot of analogies. In the second chapter, there'll be lots of stories. It's much easier to go through, so there'll be stories. Okay. Bhava pratyayo videha prakritilayana. Look at the words for the discarnate, bodiless devas, or these devas, they are adepts with bodiless consciousness, and those subsisting in the elementals. This asaṃprajñāta samadhi happens by birth. Okay. Now we'll see what it means. Bhava, become or manifested. Here pratyaya means it doesn't mean the contents of the screen of the mind. Here it means caused by. Videha means those without bodies, and prakritilaya, they are people who are merged. So Patanjali talks about people who are merged in prakriti. Prakriti laya. Laya means pralayam. It's a great merger. Everything just merges or goes into the unmanifested state. Pralayam. So there is creation of the universe, srishti, and the universe exists, and then at the end, it pralayam. It just dissolves. So people who are merged with prakriti. So the videhas, how Swami Hariharananda defines this, these are beings like certain gods or deities who through intense meditation on a subtle object in a past life are reborn without a gross body. and they live in the state for a long time. It is like kaivalya, but it's not. The latencies, the samskaras still remain and they're brought out by these latencies sprouting. When the seed sprouts, they've come out, and we'll see a story to show that example. Then he talks about the prakriti layas are people who are merged in prakriti. They are beings who, through intense meditation on the unmanifest source of nature, are able to achieve a state of complete dormant absorption into it. The mind's retaining latent impressions. So as it is like a state of liberation, but they can be brought out of it when these latent impressions sprout. The seeds become sprouts. So Patanjali, here is the reason why he is saying this. Patanjali says, beware of these states. These are not liberation. Very clearly, Patanjali says that. And he's giving a warning about this impermanency, because as long as all your storehouse of karma, the impressions are there, it will sprout. So it is only through knowledge that those impressions can be wiped off. Okay, now let us look into the story of Rishi Saubari. This is from the Bhagavata Purana. There was once a great Rishi, a sage called Saubari. He was determined, he wanted to get into great states of Samadhi. He was determined to do tapas, so rigorous that no worldly distraction could touch him. So what did he do? He didn't want any distraction. So because of his great practice already, he decided to meditate underwater in the depths of the Yamuna river. He remained there for a long time, holding his breath. I don't know how long, so long. And to an external observer, he would look perfectly liberated. He had no contact with women, no contact with wealth, no contact with society. He was effectively merged with the element of water. So it's Prakriti Laya, merged with Prakriti. Prakriti here is water. Then there's a trigger happened. The seed of desire was still there in the Rishi. One day, while submerged in this trance, he happened to open his eyes. So there was some things going around him, and he saw a large male fish, the king of the fish, playing happily with his female partner and their many offspring. Watching the fish enjoy domestic bliss, a sudden overpowering desire came to the Rishi. So the latent impression of loneliness, it's not been fried, it is there, it's remaining in him. It had been suppressed, but it had not been burnt. So he thought, I also want to enjoy the happiness of family life. So he emerged from the water. All his years of penance, this tapas, undone in a split second, is gone. He went to King Mandata, that's the name of the king in that region. He asked for one of the hand of one of his 50 daughters. And this is an old Rishi. The king was afraid. I mean, these Rishis, they have superpowers. What if he gives him a curse? So he didn't directly say no. He said, okay, you may enter the palace, and whichever of my 50 daughters decides to marry you, voluntarily, out of her own choice, you may marry her. That daughter shall be your wife. Now, what the king didn't know is Saubari had magic powers. So he used his yogic powers, he used his yogic siddhis to transform himself into a handsome young man. And when he went into the palace, all the 50 princesses fell in love with him. They all wanted to marry him. And they fought with each other as to who would marry. So Saubari ended up marrying all 50 princesses. And he treated them so well. He gave the illusion of happiness, used his immense yogic merit, all the merit he had accumulated in this and past lifetimes. He created 50 crystal palaces. Out of siddhis, he created 50 lush gardens. He created servants for each wife. And he expanded himself, not just that, he expanded himself into 50 forms so he could be with every wife simultaneously. He spent many, many years enjoying the highest sensory pleasures. He had many children and he thought he was happy. Then one day, after many years of enjoyment, he realized, he looked at his family and he realized he was not any more satisfied than he was on day one before he started meditating. So he realized that desire is like a fuel. You add fuel to a fire, the fire only burns strong. It creates more desire. So adding fuel to the fire of desire, feeding the desire with more and more pleasure is not a way to extinguish it. So he saw that his underwater samadhi, his prakritilaya, it had been fragile because he isolated himself physically, but he was not detaching himself mentally. The vairagyam was not there. So therefore, he returned to the forest, this time with true understanding, and he started doing more meditation. And guess what is the climax to the story? Does anybody want to guess? Anybody? When he goes to the forest? Take a guess. What happens? Anybody wants to say? Amy, Mimi, Anu? Everybody is quiet.
I'm totally clueless. I have no idea.
Okay. All the...
Maybe his wives also followed, all the 50
Yeah,
wives followed him.
they also followed. All of them, they also started meditating. So this is from the Bhagavad Purana. Okay. All right. So this is...
Maybe the wives followed him.
Yeah, they also followed him. See?
Can't hear.
Yeah, they also followed. So, and this is the famous the verse. Aho imam pasya me vipashyata me vinasham tapasvina saccharita vratasya antarchale varichara prasangat prachavitam brahmachiratrutam yat. Alas, look at my fall. I was an ascetic who had observed strict vows, but simply by the association of a fish, varichara, while underwater, I fell from the spiritual position which I had held for so long. So he's lamenting. And what meter is this in? Anything that is like fantastic or a cry of lamentation. When Arjuna laments, what meter does he lament in?
Trishtup.
Trishtup meter. It is in Trishtup meter. This is from the Bhagavata Purana. So Samadhi of the Videhas and Prakritilayas, they look like asaṃprajñāta Samadhi, but it feels like ultimate freedom. There's a tap. The latent impressions remain. So this is the critical difference to true asaṃprajñāta Samadhi, which is based on Para-vairāgyam. That's why the vairāgya is very important. It is built on the foundation of viveka, discrimination between Puruṣa and Prakriti. Puruṣa is always happy. Prakriti is happiness comes and goes with the guṇas, the fluctuation. This path fries the seeds of all the samskaras leading to permanent liberation. You'll see that in chapter 3 also. Okay. Then for others, Patanjali's path is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajñā, Purvaka, Itaresham. Others who follow the path of prescribed effort adopt Shraddha, reverential faith, Virya, vigor, Smriti, that is repeated recollection or remembering things, Samadhi, concentration, and Prajñā, real knowledge. So this is how you have to focus, concentrate, and attain asaṃprajñāta Samadhi. So this is the path to asaṃprajñāta Samadhi. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. So let's see. And one more we will do. Tīvra samveganam asannaha. Yogis with the intense order to still the mind achieve this result quickly. The word samvega is a technical term. It means not only detachment, but aptitude combined with a feeling of reverence in a devotional practice, the resultant order to hasten forward. It is gathering momentum as you proceed. Asannaha means bringing to the practice, to the proximity. Tīvra means intense. Samvegam is enthusiasm. Great, like momentum building up as you go. Yogis with the intense order to still the mind achieve the result quickly. Okay, we will stop the recording here.